What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Thursday morning, which to me is one of the better days to make trades in fantasy football. We have waivers done yesterday. Everyone's getting around to setting their lineups and realizing where their holes are in their team. So today, we're going to talk through my must-buy and sell trade targets for week 3 of the fantasy football season. We haven't done a video like this where we do buys and sells yet this season, but we're bringing it back. The last 2 years, I think, we've done a video like this every single week. So if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, the theme of today's buys, kind of being a little bit of a predator. All right, if you have a guy in your league who's 0-2, who's down bad, thinking irrationally, just give him a little tap on the shoulder. Say, hey, how can I help? You know, you're 0-2. How can I dig you out of this hole? And I think one of the best guys to go and get, a guy who's probably on a lot of 0-2 teams, is Jamarr Chase. Now, for this video, we have about like 5 buys, 3 sells for you guys. And with Jamarr Chase, I mean, we don't have to go, we're going to go into detail on why you should buy Jamarr Chase, but we know he's a very talented wide receiver. He is the wide receiver 54 without a single 10-point PPR game to this point, which I imagine a lot of people are panicking over. A lot of people are getting a little shaky on this Bengals offense. You have Joe Burrow with a calf injury. Just the vibes all around on the Bengals are very bad. And I think that creates the perfect buying opportunity to go out and buy a guy who was a consensus top 3 redraft pick through 2 games that we know is very talented. Where even with his 2 dud games, if we look through since 1970, highest points per game through a wide receiver's first 3 years, again, including these 2 dud games, has him at 5th all time behind just OBJ, Justin Jefferson, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice. Like, that is an insane list. He is one of 5 wide receivers ever to average over 18 plus points per game in the first 3 years of his career. He didn't just forget how to play wide receiver. Better days are ahead. We know that he is a good football player. And on top of that, we also have some historical context here where the Bengals have historically started slow under Joe Burrow, where Joe Burrow through weeks 1 and 2 over his last 4 seasons has been bad. His points per game was 18. His season-long pace was about 3,800, 25 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. If we looked at weeks 3 on, he goes from that to a 4,800 passing yard, 34 touchdown, 11 interception pace. He goes from 18 points per game to 23.7. He goes from bottom 10 in expected points added and completion percentage over expectation to top 6, right? This is a stud quarterback, Joe Burrow. He's been to a Super Bowl before. My understanding here is that they're going to eventually figure it out. Now, the calf injury is concerning with Joe Burrow. He could not play this week. It could flare up and he misses a few weeks. But my thing here is that you're buying at a discount. It's priced in. If you have to pay top dollar for Jamarr Chase and pay what you had to pay for him at the time of the draft, like if you're paying for a top 3 overall asset in redraft, then don't buy him. But if you can buy for a discount, you should, because what we understand is that the Bengals get better towards the end of the year. This calf injury is sort of short-term with Joe Burrow. And we make money in the late season of fantasy football, weeks 10 on, the playoff weeks, 15, 16, 17. And by then, Jamarr Chase should be an established top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. And if you are 2-0 or 1-1 and you can buy at a discount, you 100% should. He's still my rest of season wide receiver 3. If you can stomach some Bengals dysfunction for the short term, you 100% should go buy him. Now, we're going to do something a little bit differently in this video. Last time I had a chart, a trade value chart, and we were kind of going all around it. People are saying, Ron, like that trade value chart sucks, whatever. So we're going to do something that we only usually do on Dynasty videos, but we're going to look at Fantasy Calc in this video. Fantasy Calc is a website where it compiles every trade made across a bunch of platforms. I think it's like Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo. I'm really not sure how many sites across it is, but, or actually, let's actually go to the About page on this site here, where they go through and they kind of tell you what the site's all about here. So let's actually look here. About the site, how to use it. We generate trade values, insights, and rankings automatically from hundreds of thousands of real trades. We're constantly scraping new trades from multiple fantasy sites, adding them to our searchable trade database, and updating our trade values. That's what we're going to do here in this video. We're going to go to the trade database here. We'll go one quarterback, 12-team leagues, half PPR and full PPR. We'll go down to 3 trade assets. So a 1 for 2 or 1 for 1. Let me know if I should expand that out, but I don't want to have a 1 for 3 or like a 2 for 2. Things get a little bit squirrely there. And then we'll just type in Jamarr Chase, and we'll see what comes up. And we have it clicked off as redraft here. And there's a lot of juicy deals for Jamarr Chase. Like even this one, if you can add Zay Flowers and Kenneth Walker for Chase, I would do that. If you could add Puka, Nacua, and T. Higgins is close, I'll be honest. But Addison and Amari Cooper, I would do that all day. Addison and Brian Robinson. I mean, these are real trades that are happening. If somebody is like really, really thin at running back and you somehow can stomach trading away 2 running backs, something like this makes sense. Now, Nico Collins for Jamarr Chase, that's just insane. But Puka Nacua plus JSN, yes, all day. If you can somehow trade Garrett Wilson in a piece for Jamarr Chase, yes, all day. There's just a lot of value to be had right now with Jamarr Chase. You can buy him for relatively cheap. I think some of these are a little bit unrealistic, but you can kind of get a feel for sort of what we're thinking here in terms of buying a Jamarr Chase. I love the idea of using Puka Nacua as a bargaining chip to go get an elite asset in Jamarr Chase. Now, our next player we're going to talk about here as a must-buy is Josh Jacobs. He was a buy last week, and he's just a very classic volume buy, right? Like, there's not really a ton to it. He is second in opportunity share right now among running backs. He is third in snap share. He's 6th in expected points per game at 17.3. Expected points per game, right, that X point per game number, it's just based on his carries, his red zone carries, his inside the 5 carries, his targets, his ADOT. How many points should he be scoring on his touches? He's underperforming that volume by 7.8 points per game, which is insane. Last year, he had 17.4 expected points per game. Right now, he's at 17.3. So he has the exact same role, but last year, he actually outperformed his volume by 2 points per game. You have to think that things bounce back. Even if he doesn't outperform his expected output this year, it should stay about on pace, and Jacobs should be hovering around that 17 points per game over the rest of the year. You get a prime bounce back spot here versus the Steelers, who are allowing the most fantasy points to opposing wide receiver or opposing running backs. So it's just the perfect setup here for Jacobs to bounce back. The volume has been there. Running backs are very scarce right now. So if you can somehow get a deal to get Josh Jacobs on the cheap, you 100% should. If we look at what Fantasy Calc has going on here for Josh Jacobs, you have some really juicy offers out there where you have, I wouldn't do Amon-Ra St. Brown. I wouldn't do these. James Cook and Terry McLaurin, I 100% would do that. Elijah Moore and Joe Mixon, 100% would do that. I don't know if you can. I love Nico Collins, but if you can wave around Nico Collins, add a random running back and Josh Jacobs, you absolutely should. If you could do Michael Pittman or some wide receiver plus one of these stopgap Zach Moss, Jerome Ford types, absolutely do that. I mean, this one's ridiculous. Christian Kirk and Khalil Herbert. I would do Kyron Williams for Josh Jacobs straight up. I would do. I don't even mind. There was like a Cooper Kupp one I saw. If you can do Cooper Kupp for Josh Jacobs in a sizable plus like Mike Evans, I actually don't hate that. Like if you need points right this very second, I actually don't hate that at all. DK Metcalf in a very small piece for Josh Jacobs, I actually don't mind that at all. So yeah, there's a lot of good trades on here. I wouldn't quite do this like ETN one, but people are really waving around Khalil Herbert in a piece for Jacobs. I don't know how realistic that is, but I would love that if that's on the table for any of you guys. Now, moving on here, we have our third buy. We have Jaylen Waddle. Now, a lot of these buys are kind of luxury buys, but I did want to give you guys good players to go after. And Jaylen Waddle, right now, is probably on a disappointed manager's roster, where he went out and he drafted Jaylen Waddle in the second round. And Jaylen Waddle is the wide receiver 37 in points per game right now, 12.1 points per game. And he's potentially missing week 3 here with a concussion. When we talk about moving forward, right, this is a buy for a team that's doing well in the short term. Jaylen Waddle, a little bit murky in terms of the concussion thing. We don't know if he's going to play this week, but over an entire season, I'm betting on Jaylen Waddle all day long. I actually think that the start has been bullish for him, surprisingly, despite not even being a wide receiver 3 in points per game right now, because the Dolphins' offense is so good. They lead the entire NFL in passing yards right now, and if they're just a top 5 passing offense in the NFL over the entire season, which it looks like they will be, Waddle is going to pay off. Like, they have 355 passing yards per game right now. That's enough of an environment for both Waddle and Tyreek to succeed. It's just been mostly Tyreek through 2 games. Things are going to bounce back for Waddle. He had 18 points per game in 11 games with Tua last year, and in that same sample, Tyreek also had 23 points per game. So they can both be very, very good, and the passing offense has looked so great so far that there's going to be enough room for both of them to coexist. So when we talk about Waddle, he's actually going for like dirt cheap on Fantasy Calc right now. I was looking through some of these last night. I mean, what the hell is this, guys? What the hell are we doing here? Is that Tutu Atwell? Yeah, Tutu Atwell and Terry McLaurin, yes. James Conner and Amari Cooper. If you don't need running back, I actually like that a lot. You can go with, Jerome Ford, Michael Thomas. that's just, if you can somehow turn one of these Jerome Fords, Kyron Williams, add a wide receiver and get Jaylen Waddle, 1,000% do that. I like the Kyron move. I like Kamara for Jaylen Waddle a ton. James Cook for Jaylen Waddle straight up I would do. I think that there was one that was just like Brian Robinson straight up as well that I would do. You can get, there's some very, very interesting things in here. Yeah, like Sky Moore, Raheem Mostert. All day on that one. Treylon Burks and Mike Evans. If you can somehow, I love Mike Evans. I love Nico Collins. But if you can somehow turn one of them plus another piece into Jaylen Waddle, you 100% have to do it. I like this Garrett Wilson in a piece for Jaylen Waddle. Yeah, there's a lot of moves being made with Waddle right now, and a lot of them are very cheap compared to what you paid for on draft day. I've been trying to, when I made the outline for this video, I made sure to check the actual trades that have happened in the last like 24 hours to see what their prices are trading at, just to get a gauge, because there were a couple players I had on this list. Like, what am I trying to think of? One was like Alvin Kamara. I was like, Alvin Kamara is a great buy right now. You have Jamal Williams out. You have he's coming back next week. He should be the main back there. And Alvin Kamara has been trading for a premium. So it's actually nice to be able to gauge what's actually going on here to give you guys the best trade targets possible. Now, next up we have Breece Hall, who has a lot of panic on him right now. Right, there was a lot of excitement. Week 1, he has 127 yards, 10 carries, electric. He looks amazing. And then he drops a goose egg in Dallas with just 4 touches. And I imagine people are really panicking here because they probably started Breece Hall thinking that, okay, it's only going to go up from week 1, right? Wheels all the way up. Oh my God, Breece Hall is back. And he comes out here and has a goose egg and just 4 touches. But what I'll say is that Dallas is the best defense in the NFL. And after about 2 quarters in this game, it was a lost cause. There was no reason to keep on giving Breece Hall touches in a non-competitive game script. And we also knew going in, when you drafted Breece Hall, it was going to be a little bit iffy early on. They were going to ramp up his touches, and we haven't even seen him at 100% yet, even though he has cracked 20 miles per hour twice already. He has had 2 super long runs. You can already sort of see that the juice is there. And like Jamarr Chase, and like this entire idea of the video, is you're drafting players and you're trying to create a team that is going to be the best team from weeks 10 on. That is the objective of fantasy football. I know that it's to win, make it to the playoffs, whatever, but if you have the best team through the first 6 weeks and then things sort of trail off and then you limp into the playoffs and lose in the first or second round, you get no money. You want to have a monster down the stretch, and that's what Breece Hall gives you, where he has top 5 running back upside down the stretch. Dalvin Cook has been a non-factor. He's looked absolutely washed here, and he's only going to keep on getting more volume as the year goes on, and from weeks 6 on, Breece Hall could be an absolute difference maker for you. And I think people are really, really spooked on kind of what the Cowboys game was for Breece Hall, where if we look at the trades that have happened for him recently, there's some guys that are paying up for him, but like Kyron Williams for Breece Hall all day, James Cook for Breece Hall and a plus all day, Khalil Herbert and Terry McLaurin for Breece Hall, I would do that. Keenan Allen for Breece Hall, that actually gets very close. I wouldn't do that. That's actually, we're not even going to really give that any mind, but yeah, like these Kyron Williams for him, 100%. If someone needs a tight end, you have like a Kittle or a Goddard, I would 100% do that as well. I like, if you have Rachaad White or any of these Rachaad White, James Conner, I don't think Alexander Madison anymore, but like Miles Sanders, if you can turn any of those guys, maybe even add a very small piece and get to Breece Hall, 100% would do that. Now, moving on to our next, Tyler Lockett, that's crazy. Now, moving on to our next one here, we have Jonathan Taylor as our last buy, our 5th and final buy here. And if the Jonathan Taylor owner is 0-2, see if you can pry Jonathan Taylor off of him. This is 4 for 4 injury specialist. We've been mentioning him a ton lately, Jeff Mueller. And He wrote this up on Jonathan Taylor. He said, Jonathan Taylor will remain a buy low for me until he steps onto the field. You have 3 scenarios. 1, he returns to Indianapolis. Deion Jackson had a 72% snap share. Zach Moss had a ton of volume. And Jonathan Taylor would be the RB1 in a really fun offense that plays at a fast pace and has looked good so far. He could get traded to a team who will want to use him. Or C, he's traded eventually to a team that will utilize and pay him. All 3 of them are pretty good scenarios here. And I imagine there's a lot of guys out there that have Jonathan Taylor and are frustrated, are down bad. They need points. So when they need points, again, if you have a Jonathan Taylor owner in your league and he's 0-2, tap him on his shoulder, say, hey, how can I help you right here, right now, And once you come to that conclusion, you can make a little trade ski. I don't know that I like this Swift plus JSN one, but if you can do, again, if you can do any of these dead zone, Rachaad White, Miles Sanders, Alexander Madison, James Conner, and turn that into Jonathan Taylor, 100% do that. If you can take Jerome Ford or Kyron Williams, one of these waiver wire running backs, I think Romeo Dobbs probably a little bit too low, but if you could do like Jerome Ford and Nico Collins for Jonathan Taylor, I would do that all day. If you could somehow turn Garrett Wilson into Jonathan Taylor, 100% do that. If you can turn, what else is on here? I don't mind this George Pickens, Aaron Jones one, but that actually seems too steep. I actually never mind on that. But also, I like this Rachaad White, Rashad Bateman one. Like, that's kind of the same as above with the Rachaad White, but it kind of shows what kind of plus you have to add to close that gap. What else? I don't mind Puka Nacua for Jonathan Taylor, but I think you could maybe get more for Puka. But yeah, you can kind of see he's not trading. I mean, Brian Robinson for JT straight up, I would do that as well if somebody needed instant points. But you can kind of see he's not all that expensive, Jonathan Taylor. Now, flipping over to the other side of this video, we have our must-sells here, which our first must-sell, a lot of guys in the comments are going to be very upset about this one, but it's Puka Nacua. Here's what I'll say about Puka Nacua. I am not saying to sell him at your earliest convenience. I am saying not to sell him for a bag of chips. But what I am saying is some of these prices on Puka Nacua are wild. Where if we just go straight to Fantasy Calc right now and we pull up Puka Nacua's recent trades, fellas, like, it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, some of them are sensible, right? I mean, like, these first couple are definitely sensible here where it's like Jerome Ford, Kyron Williams. But then you get, if you can turn Puka Nacua into, if you can do Puka Nacua and like one of these Jerome Ford, Kyron Williams types, turn that into Travis Etienne, do that. If you can do Puka Nacua plus, again, one of these Jerome Ford, Kyron Williams types for CeeDee Lamb, do that. If you can do Puka Nacua and a piece for Austin Eckler, do that. If you can do Puka Nacua and a piece for Jamarr Chase, do that. If you can somehow do Puka Nacua for Calvin Ridley straight up, or Puka Nacua for Jamarr Chase and a piece, do that. What I'm trying to say here, Puka Nacua again in a piece for Jamar Chase. Yes, do that all day long. Please, please, please do that all day long. Puka Nacua in a piece for Travis Etienne. Yes. Here's what I'll say on Puka Nacua. We'll get into why I would sell him in a second, but this is what it comes down to. Puka Nacua for me, I did my rest of season rankings, which, by the way, that'll be on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I drop my rest of season rankings every single Wednesday night, so you can go out there and make trades based off how I feel about players moving forward. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. That'll be down below in the description, in the comment section down below. But here's what it comes down to with Puka Nacua. If you can take a guy who is my rest of season wide receiver 18 and turn that into a top 5 or top 10 player at their position for rest of season, you 100% should. If you can somehow turn Puka Nacua into what would be a first or second round redraft value today, you 100% should, right? Like, those trades, you're getting into elite players like CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler, Calvin Ridley. If you can get one of these true difference makers, you absolutely have to. I know it's a great story. I know he's been red hot, but this is, at the end of the day, a day 3 pick, and PPR points in your first 2 games isn't some like crazy qualifier where, yes, Anquan Boldin. So this is a player's first 2 games in the NFL, most PPR points. Anquan Boldin's a stud, but then you have Marquise Brown, you have Eddie Royal, you have Terry McLaurin, 3 guys who I believe have never finished with a top 12 wide receiver point per game season. You have AJ Green, Garrett Wilson, those are both really good. And you have Kiki QT, Martavis Bryant. Like, it's not this bulletproof list of like the first 2 games meaning everything. Like, Puka Nacua is not a lock to ever be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. He is not a lock to be an all-pro. He is not a lock to even finish this year as a top 12 wide receiver in points per game. So what I'm trying to say is he has 2 more weeks. Then you have Cooper Kupp, who is arguably the best target earner in the NFL. Puka Nacua is not going to be gone in that sense. He's going to sort of revert to this fringy wide receiver 2, like wide receiver 3 type of play. And my thing here is that if you can cash out of, to me, if someone who's going to be a rest of season wide receiver 3, if you can cash out of that for a truly elite top 10 difference maker, you absolutely have to. Now, if you kick the tires and everyone's like, go kick rocks, you can take my waiver wire ads like Kyren Williams and Jerome Ford, but you're not touching Jamarr Chase, you're not touching Travis Etienne or Josh Jacobs or any of these guys, then fine. Move on. It's not a big deal. But I think that if you have Puka Nacua and he's not a must start in your lineup this week and you're doing all right, kick the tires, sort of see what you can get there. Now, next up we have Rachaad White as a sell for me. And I like him as a sell. He's coming off a big game. 21.3 points there. He had 73 rushing yards. He had a touchdown. He had 5 catches for 30 yards. And I would love to sell him to an RB needy 0-2 team where Rachaad White's one of these dead zone backs. He is a volume-dependent RB2, and I just don't think it's smart to hold guys like this. So this is a guy in week 1 who had 2.3 yards per carry against the Vikings. The Vikings have the worst EPA per play rush defense right now, as we saw versus DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift had 170 rushing yards versus these guys, and Rachaad White couldn't get anything going between the tackle. We also, if we look at rushing yards over expected, so that's just on a given play, based on the blocking, how many defenders in the box, how many yards should you be getting? He is minus 1.37 rushing yards over expected per attempt. The only running backs worse than that, Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook. It's just an awful cohort of running backs even being the same breath as here. Now, he also then gets Philadelphia this week. He's going to struggle. He gets New Orleans this week, who has always been pretty good against the run, and then he gets a bye week. So you have 3 weeks here of him struggling potentially, and his trade value kind of falling off a cliff. So if you can take this positive game and sell him to a spot that really needs running back, you absolutely should. Where a lot of these trades for Rachaad White on Fantasy Calc are pretty juicy. Like, you can get some really nice hauls for Rachaad White here where you can go out there. Let's see. I mean, if you need a wide receiver, I don't mind selling Rachaad White for Michael Pittman, but I think you can get a little bit more here. Like, if we go down, I don't mind Rachaad White in a piece for Alvin Kamara. I don't mind as well. Like, some of these better ones, like if I can take Rachaad White and turn that into one of Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, or, all the way down here in Breece Hall, 100% do that. Now, in terms of, like, you might have to add a piece here and there to get there, but 100%, I love all of those moves to sort of upgrade that running back spot. Like, I would take Rachaad White, go to an RB needy team that has Breece Hall, JT, or Saquon, or even like an Eckler, like some sort of running back that we know is going to be good, but isn't playing right now or isn't producing right now, Josh Jacobs as well, and see what you can sort of make work with Rachaad White. Now, our last sell here, it's a guy we had as a sell on last week's video, but I wanted to just sort of reiterate it. We have Garrett Wilson. And I wanted to put him here because he scores another touchdown. It keeps him afloat. He's the wide receiver 21 in points per game, despite being the wide receiver 39 in expected points per game. So he's outproducing his volume, and he's good enough to do that over an entire season, but not to this extent. And if you can somehow trade on the enthusiasm behind him actually scoring fantasy points, you 100% should. This is a brutal passing game environment. Whereas for Breece Hall, I'm not as worried. He has shown that he can create for himself. He did it last year in a Zach Wilson offense. He can do it this year in a Zach Wilson offense. It lowers his touchdown upside, but outside of that, Breece Hall should be fine. But in terms of the passing game, you have Zach Wilson, who is a bottom 5 efficiency quarterback right now in EPA per play. And this is the only passing offense with under 50 pass attempts right now through 2 games, the lowest volume pass attempt offense. So they're not sustaining drives. It's just really tough to take that small of volume and be an efficient wide receiver on that kind of volume. So with Garrett Wilson, if you can take kind of the good faith of that and sell him on some enthusiasm, someone that might need some wide receiver scoring, 100% do that. 100% do that. I mean, he is one of the most traded players right now. And if we look at his fantasy calc, you can get him you can sell him for relatively cheap here where, Rashid Shaheed, that's insane. But if you can sell Garrett Wilson and Kyren Williams or Stephon Diggs, oh my God. All day. Garrett Wilson for ETN straight up, all day I would do that. Garrett Wilson, what else is in here? Garrett Wilson, yeah, Garrett Wilson and like a Kyron Williams or Jerome Ford for an A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, 100% would do that. Garrett Wilson in a small piece like Raheem Mostert for Saquon Barkley, I would do that. But yeah, you can kind of see there's a lot of options. Garrett Wilson in a piece for Jamar Chase, I mean, all day long, I would do that. So just kick the tire, see what you can kind of get on Garrett Wilson. I imagine most people are sort of hip to him being a popular sell target right now, but as Fantasy Calc shows, people are buying. So with that being said, that is our first must-buy and sell trade target of the 2023 season, or video of the 2023 season. As always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And if you want the full rest of season rankings to make trades for yourself, make sure you check it out. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart will be in the description and the comment section down below. But if you can't support there, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my